Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for a special live and in-person Black Writers Read event. My name is Nicole Young-Martin, and I'm the founder, producer, and host for this series. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind-the-scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted over 60 authors representing 10+ genres from 4 countries and 15 states. Black Writers Read is now in its 4th season, and it's presented as both a live stream interview on social media and an audio podcast. We have grown so much since the start of the series and have everyone here in the audience to thank for that. I'm getting chills as I say that, because like it's grown because of all of you, and I'm so appreciative. We try to host an in-person event at least once a year. In 2022, we hosted Rage Hezekiah at the Lava Center in Greenfield, and that interview was hosted and then presented by Greenfield Community Television. Last year we hosted Regine Jackson at the Artist Cafe in Springfield, and today we're here at this beautiful studio of Holyoke Media. These events are special to attendees as we do not host these as a live stream, so this is a recording that you're seeing. We do plan to share the audio from today's conversation on the podcast, making this moment even more meaningful for the folks that are here. So the audio podcast will post probably in a couple of weeks or so, and it will be an edited down version of today's conversation. So for today's event, we'll be presenting and be in conversation with Janine Fondon, who I'm very excited to finally get on this side of the microphone. Like, we're actually hosting her because she's so used to talking about other people's work, and she's now able to talk about her own. Janine Fondon is an award-winning writer, digital media producer, and educator historian who uses the art and science of communication and inclusion to elevate voices and educate audiences and inspire creative thinking in a world of change. As assistant professor and chair of undergraduate communications at Bay Path University for 10 years, she founded the college's inaugural multimedia digital newsroom for students and continues to work on communication projects to connect communities. To be able to do something like that in a higher education setting is huge. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Fondon earned a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Anthropology from Colgate University, a Master of Arts in Communication and Business from New York University, and her MFA in Creative Nonfiction Writing from Bay Path University. As a media ecologist, artist curator, and narrative historian, Fondon created a popular museum exhibit on women's history, Voices of Resilience, highlighting inclusive narratives bearing untold stories. Amongst her many awards, she has received the, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, the Pynchon Medal, the Western Massachusetts Region's 100+ Euro Public Service Award from the Advertising Club of Western Massachusetts, as well as several creative awards. She also has a 20-year legacy of content creation, diverse outreach, and public relations. Fonda and her husband created a legacy communication project, UnityFirst.com, which is now one of the longest running, I'm gonna say this slow because it's important, longest running Black-owned e-news sites founded in Massachusetts that serves an inclusive audience nationwide. She has also published numerous editorials in the local newspaper, the Springfield Republican, and created a range of narrative history video stories on UnityFirst.com. Fondon is inspired and honored to tell the stories of many generations. To learn more about Janine and her work, please visit her website at janinefondon.com. Today's event is supported by the On the Move Forum. The On the Move Forum convenes a range of communities to explore history through the lens of diverse perspectives and inclusive stories, all to set a firm foundation for networking, resource sharing, personal growth, and knowledge building. Through conversations, dialogue, and reality checks, the interactive sessions are designed to provoke thought, build community, and inspire success and action. As an informal collective, we acknowledge the hills we climb, the paths we forge, and the future we create. Along the journey, along historic milestones past and present. This is an active group that networks, supports, and connects in virtual spaces as well as in person. Special thanks to the On the Move Forum for their support, which I wanted to also name that I received an award from them last year in 2023. And also special thanks to Holyoke Media for hosting us today. Prior to starting today's event, I wish to take a moment to acknowledge a mentor of mine whose presence will always be felt in the room and continues to have a special place in my heart and my work. Last fall, I think this is the first time I'm talking about it openly. Last fall, Dr. Demetria Shabazz assumed her role as ancestor. I met her, I think in like 2009. She was my professor for a Black women in film class. And many of the people that I look up to now, including Audre Lorde and several other people, I met through Dr. Shabazz's work. Then she mentored me through a couple of independent studies, and I was working on my MA in English at UMass at the time. And I remember a conversation I had with her about going to get my doctorate. And like, unlike other professors on campus, she was like, you're gonna do it. It's not even you're gonna do it, you should do it, and you will do it. And I graduated, I finished in October of 2023. And she is acknowledged in a dedication in my dissertation, and she has really informed like how my interview style, the people who I include in my work, just so much of what I do. And given also to her work with Janine, I wanted to take an opportunity to acknowledge all of the work that not only Dee has done, but the ways in which her legacy continues. Here's the format of today's event. Janine will first read an excerpt from her book, then we'll chat about her book and her work, then I'll invite audience members to pose questions to Janine. Given that this conversation will be featured on an upcoming audio podcast episode, I'll be sure to repeat the question so that the question goes on air and not the voice of the person asking the question. This is how we're able to bypass media waivers, because we don't have those for this occasion. So I'd now like to turn it over to, and I usually say the virtual stage because I'm streaming over live in person, to Janine, who will share an excerpt from her work.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for all of your great work and with this series and all of the things that you do. It's an honor to sit here before you. And also, Dr. Demetria Shabazz. Worked with her many years and always in awe of her work in oral history and research. And, she was one of the ones that helped found the On the Move and the Voices of Resilience and so forth. Yes. So I sit here with that thought that she is here. And also, many people know LaWanna Hood. I don't know how many people know that name, but the great LaWanna Hood from the Pan-African Historical Museum. Yeah. Another great woman who was a woman of history and an advocate for voice. So I sit here in honor of both of them.
Yeah, thank you for giving the shout out to PAMUSA, which my students in my arts marketing class took them on as a case study. So I love that we're able to acknowledge their work in this moment.
Yes, and I'm about to read a poem that is the lead in the book, which is very different, but my father, who is the real inspiration for this, because he was the one who collected a lot of the information that I'm now talking about. And I continued his research. He was a community researcher of his own, so self-made. And I always said he must be searching for something, so I have carried that on. And the other name I want to call out is Janine Fondon, who's in the audience with us today, our daughter.
Yes.
And a lot of my students who are here, thank you so much. Yes. Because if all that we do does not reach this generation, where is the purpose? Right. So it is an honor for all of them to be here, and for you, it makes my generation feel like, yes, this is a great thing. And everyone here has a really great voice. So I know whatever comes is what we hope. So here's the poem. And I begin it by saying, these are the things that we seek. We are seekers, Together on unrequited waters, we seek to move past waves of blinded intention to find hope on a climax of ascension and belonging. Seeking to rise with the waves of time, we tread water in the seas of inclusion as we ride the rough oceans with disruption, eruption, and interruption, holding the sail, balancing the bow, and staying the course, all to reimagine what's next in the uncertainty of unending seas, all while seeking hope in a suitcase filled with inspiration on little pieces of paper, like clues in the cloud, writings resembling wrinkles in time, and lines like footprints in the sand, leading to a land not promised. We seek truth. Eye to eye, we search for truth with intuitive transparency in a world that sees fear before hope, takes love for granted, and dismisses the authentic power of humanity in the face of fear. We search for truth through the voices we raise and the words we recognize. We search for truth through others who see us, hear us, and believe us. Our search for truth becomes evident when we look through the lens of our own spirit and share our intention with those who are skilled to receive it. Through a kaleidoscope of demotion, commotion, and yes, emotion, we see our fractured vision of truth through blurred lines and stinted wokeness of a world considered in passage. Yet, we insist that truth is clear and present for those who see it, acknowledge it, and feel it. We seek connection. We connect via each other's truths. And as you see me, you see yourself in the journey. We are only as strong as the person we see on the other side of the table. As I see you, I see the past, the present, and our fire this time, igniting our connection, our bond, our truth, our history, our walk into the future. As we see each other, our gratitude becomes the tie that binds. Our wisdom becomes the heart of our existence. And our common ground demonstrates the inclusion we seek and the belonging we need. Let us be eagles taking flight in wonder and landing with that watchful glare and stare, forcing us all to revisit how we live in a changing world filled with division yet full of opportunity. We seek transparency through wisdom. The timelines of our history educate us like a mirror, showing us who we are and who we will be, inside and out, all to see the reflection of our elders on whose shoulders we stand, all by accepting our mirrors, adorned with our glory as the wisdom warriors we need to be, should be, and will be. Looking in the mirror, I am the one who sees truth, because you taught me. I am the one who sees you before you see yourself, because you taught me. I am the one blessed with second sight, hidden by the veil that buries the revolution within me, because you taught me. I am woven in the quilt of conscience that embraces me, protects me, prepares me, and covers me with your every glance, because you taught me. So in seeing me, I understand I am your hope. I am you, because you taught me. Together, we find a place of knowing through the passageways of our castles and our caves. I am your truth and your story, and now I dedicate this poem to our next generation, who will walk into the future as wisdom warriors who will set a new path that reimagines what's possible with God's grace. Ashe.
Wow. Yes, can we quick just, yes. One of the things I loved about it, like the line, we seek truth, many things spoke out to me, but I think for me, this poem just really highlights the importance of the lived experience, and those with the lived experience being our historians. Because we had a conversation prior to starting today about, like, you know, the world of the academic and this whole permission to being a historian and who can hold that voice and hold that torch. And so I love that the poem will be opening the book, because it literally tells us that we are our own historians, we are our own archivists, and then also too the importance of passing that torch down. That was, oh my God, that was beautiful. Like, oh my God.
It's amazing. And we really have to be students in understanding what people are trying to teach us.
Yes.
And that is, people don't realize they're walking and talking, they're teaching at the same time. And that's something we have to be, because not everybody's teaching all the things we need to embrace.
And also, too, a lot of the people aren't being acknowledged as teachers. Like, I love the mention of the next generation. Young people are some of our best teachers. One, because what I love, especially about working with youth, they are unfiltered. Like, they will tell me, like, yo, I'm a neat no. Like, I love that they're unfiltered. Like, it's an even more authentic take of the world. So the first question that I want to ask you, Janine, is, we all know you as an educator, digital producer, community convener, mom, and I want to say educator again because of just the roots that you have taken in the community. So I'd love to get to know Janine as the writer and historian, which is a very different hat to wear. When did you discover that your voice will contribute to the culture in these very unique ways?
Well, I think back to, we all go to college and we think that, we're entered the new world, which is great. You go to graduate school because you get another experience and you're finding your footing and how your voice fits. But the place where I felt that I said this is something different is when my husband and I started Unity First, because here we are starting an African-American focused publication in the middle of Framingham, Mass, of which, again, not very diverse at the time, and for people to understand what that was, that was amazing. And also we were in the midst of a real cusp around changing times. I remember going to the Chamber of Commerce. Both my husband and I went to say, we're going to start this business. This is great. We're going to have it, laid out on computers and all of that. And they said, oh, that's going to die a natural death. And I was just like, now I know you really don't know what you're talking about.
Wow.
Because he worked for IBM. I worked for a tech company, digital, both of us. So we know this is going somewhere. So that's when we really said, we have to put our stake in the ground and share our stories. And the other thing, there's so many people who move here from other places, but I know in the spaces I were in, you mentioned Amsterdam News and you mentioned a lot of the Black press experience, clueless. So I said, well, now they're not really talking about the things that I've been used to talking about. So we have to put our stake in the ground to share that.
Wow.
And my husband's from Mississippi, so
that's right.
Between Mississippi, Queens, the Bronx, there you go. So we were coming here to Massachusetts, for jobs, but that voice was, really not there. And there were so many other people with us, so that were new to this area, and we said it's time for us to share the voice.
Yeah, and I'm glad. Like, I didn't realize y'all started in Framingham, because Framingham, for context, for people who are joining us listening, is white. It's still white. It's still really white now. It's still, and it's a special kind of white, at least from like what I know of it. And a lot of Massachusetts is this way, where it's like they are the only experts of every single experience, and no other experience matters. And so, because I still thought that you started Unity First in Boston, which is still like racially interesting.
We were very close to Boston.
Yeah.
And, but when we moved out to Framingham, that's where we lived. And so that's where Nakai was born around that time. And that was another kind of first experience too, that, whether moms were going back to work or not. I remember, I think a lot of the women in the bank that I worked at the time it was the first time they were pumping for their children.
Wow.
So, all the laws take place that you can now do this, but there were a lot of things changing. So not having family here, we opted for me to be home. And, but I was freelancing, and I'm just very proud to say a lot of my bosses that I had, they were able to work with me via freelance. And that was another boom.
Nice.
Where did freelancing start from? A lot of people who had to, get out there, and so it was good.
See, this is why historians and lived experience is so important. Oh my God, and this takes us to the next question. How does your work in media space differ than that as writer and historian? What do you think are some advantages and limitations of both media production and writing in nonfiction? And then, do you think there is a way for both genres to coexist as a hybrid?
Yes, I think I'm just living proof that they can coexist. And I like to think of historians and researchers, they're searching. They're searching. I think that media lens, you search with a different eye. So I like to think there's a right eye, there's a left eye, but so people who have both, you could really see it. And I've seen historians over time, and I see what they come up with. But then that's where Voices of Resilience started, because I used to see what was produced out of the research, and I used to say, but what about this? So I went to too many presentations where we're going to talk about the enslaved people, and I would be like, and what about the enslaver?
Yes.
Let's get the research on the enslaver.
Right.
And again, it's that perspective.
Yeah.
And the other lens is, people feel like this is the single story from a single lens.
Yep.
With looking at African heritage people. And if you really look, it's a very diverse lens. And it like when you think of, any history story you can pick, there is that intersection with other communities. And not all have to be negative. That's the other thing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Your forthcoming book, can you, actually I'm going to come back to that question, because you mentioned the Voices of Resilience exhibit, which was phenomenal, and I know that you can still catch a couple of things online. Special thanks to kind of like archiving and also caching on the internet. So in 2021, Springfield Museums hosted your exhibit, Voices of Resilience, the intersection of women on the move. Can you talk about the process of curating that exhibit and how it serves as source material or how it informs your book?
Yes. Well, it's amazing, because before that exhibit, I had an exhibit with Lawana Hood called The Intersection. And that really talked about a lot of the untold stories of African American women. And in all of this, and I think meeting Lawana, where she kept saying, and for those of you who don't know, she's the first African American woman in this area to have a museum, and she kept on saying, she didn't have the credits, the resume to do a lot of what she was doing, but she has the wisdom and the knowledge, and I always felt like, that was wrong. I mean, everybody knows Lawana had so much, to help other people to see. Yeah. So, and I used to say to her, I said, I'm sure people say the same thing about me too, but that's the good thing for being from New York. You just go do what you got to do. Yeah. So I said, no, we have to do our exhibit. Nick, I was there very early on in the history conversation. Yes. But it's that's the inclusiveness. Because, and I don't know if you know, the Lawana's from Detroit.
I did not know what.
Yeah, so there are a lot of Detroiters, and as she embraced this whole notion of history and knowing things. Her knowledge of Africa was amazing. Her knowledge of things local was amazing, and that's part of why I did Voices, because we have to stop telling people that your view is not a valid view. We should be in a multi-lens society where we can honor what people are sharing. Yeah. And I'm not saying don't get evidence, because that was the other thing, finding evidence of this and that, and doing the research. But that's how news people get a lot as well. You have to listen to the stories, find the stories, validate the stories. And that's how it works together.
Yeah. For your forthcoming book, can you give us, and I'm so excited to hear this, a sneak peek of what to expect? What is the source material for the book, and then why write this book now?
Well, the source material for the book, for me, coming out of a tradition that we rarely see today, meaning that a lot of books that are out of print, a lot of first primary sources that might have appeared in other generations, but you just don't see referred to. I'm providing that other view that probably hasn't been tracked for decades. So, and also it's all these stories that, for whatever reason, haven't been shared, haven't been told, and we should know. And if it makes a difference to you, like people ask, and I wrestle with this, like why would the younger generations want to really read this? It's almost like that theory that you feel better when you have information that affirms you. And it could be bad, it could be good, but at least you have a frame of reference. So it's like when you know where you come from, or you feel that you've met people from a place that you're familiar with, or that you've had the same feeling of feeling left out because of any known reason. So, and also the timeline that I carry with the book, you can begin to see what happened when. And I don't know, I would think that the younger generations would be concerned as to, you know, Harriet Tubman was not in my graduating class. Just want to let everybody know. But there are, we're getting to the point where it hasn't been taught. People do not know really, what really happened. And when you think about it, there's a story I just recently shared. If you know anything about Harlem, a lot of people assume that, African Americans were always there. They weren't always there. Harlem was not diverse. And it was a gentleman from Westfield, Philip Payton, who actually went to Harlem to start a business. He ended up creating this real estate business and moving blocks from Lower Manhattan to Harlem.
Wait, so, Westfield, Massachusetts?
I know, Westfield, Massachusetts. Yes, and there's a greater story, but that's what you have. So we haven't really heard. So when you think about how things happened, and then when my grandmother came here to New York via Ellis Island, she came in 1918. So when you think about it, if he hadn't done what he did, she wouldn't have a community because she lived in Harlem. And then I ended up going to school right down the street from where this gentleman lived. So there's really power in connections. And the biggest thing for all the young people out here, I would hate for anybody to miss what's here right now. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things in our area and people that you're going to be like, oh, wow, I had no idea, that this has happened. And it matters because these are the people that give you courage, that give you a sense that if you read anything about Philip Payton, about even a lot of people in black people at a certain period in Brooklyn, they were millionaires. I mean, when you see the timelines compared, you sort of saying, wait a minute, there's another narrative that we have to embrace. I'm not saying not believing all sides to a story, but there are many sides that just haven't been there. And this is across the country. This is not just any one place. Massachusetts has a lot of surprises because it just has not been a topic of our conversation.
Yeah. And also, too, like, when you really dig into the history, dig into the archives, dig into the stories, you'll be very surprised at things that you find out. Like, one of the things that I was surprised to find out when I finally took the time to do the Ancestry DNA is that I'm, 94% of the African continent. And the story that people tell, because I'm very African American from both sides of my family, thanks to that free cruise ship that never went back, that I always frame it that way. People say, like, I think Henry Louis Gates gave this statistic saying African Americans specifically have at least 10 to 20% white European ancestry in their lineage because of slavery. And I'm like, my white lineage is 4%. So who's going to explain that story? And so this is why listening to people within communities and doing your own work is important, because the larger story of your community is not necessarily your story. So you have to find your story. And this leads me into the next question. Why do you believe it's important for Black women in particular to write about history and to contribute to the literary canon in this way? So to preface, I've had poets on, I've had fiction authors, I've had historians on, but I believe the historians I've had on have been Black men predominantly. And so now I have a Black woman historian on. So why is it important for Black women to insert themselves as historians within the literary canon?
Well, I'll throw it back also to the younger generation, because historically, a lot of the history has been told through the lens of a Black woman. If you see, as I say in the poem, if you see that, because other people might contest that.
Right.
But for young people who are now looking at their own trajectories, they should really study how some of these others have done things, because they're doing them right now.
Right.
And I believe that this generation is the most exciting. They're the most educated. They're, with the computers, the phones, everything. There's so much more that their potential is probably exponential compared to other generations. But I don't know if they're getting that message. I don't know if that's the message that they're really getting. As a professor, I see a lot of students in class that there are definitely many standouts that are way beyond what I might have seen 10 years ago.
Wow.
So that's my hope with all of this. I want them to see, and there are a few that I can call in this audience that found their voices and are out there speaking, doing wonderful things. But that's just a small portion of their potential. But we want everyone to rise to their potential, because for sure, that's the message of history that come through the generations, but we just don't see it. So you think of my grandmother, who came here and, again, made her way in this country. Irene Morgan is my aunt. She was the woman who won a desegregation case in terms of busing 10 years before Rosa Parks.
Oh, wow.
So you think about that. And then by research, I found that she wasn't even the first. There was a woman in the 1800s who got thrown out of a bus in New York and fought her case. So, but if you study legal precedent, you will see, hopefully some of that, So you think about, these are the people in the midst. My father, who I credit with being that 17-year-old that left New York to go to integrate the Marine Corps. He was in the Montford Point Marines, very fair-skinned young man who I think he ended up, going down to Camp Lejeune down south, and he probably wondered, what is going on? He had a lifelong search to say, kind of looking up, why are people feeling this way? What's the history? And he used to take us around many different places, and I think he too was searching. So, and I just picked up on that as well, because no one explains to you at 17. We know we have a different kind of world. No one is prepared to see the depth of what that is. And you can imagine, integrating, the Marine Corps. And then I fast forward to what everybody's seeing today. We need those same skills to, really navigate the social, political, work environment that we have right now. It is not easy, but we will need on all of that exponential growth for your generation to lead us.
Wow.
I know, I'm just
It's like we have these huge meta important things, and I'm just like, I'm just a little podcast. How can I segue to my next question when we're talking about legit changing the world?
Well, and that's part of what I'm saying here is that the voices of a lot of the work that you're all doing, you never know, you may become the next Oprah. You never know, and not that that's the standard, but what I'm saying, you don't know where your voice is going to take you to, and you have a new landscape to take it and to make a difference. So, and I tell people, if we could have couple of 100,000 people listening to Unity First.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. And I tell people it's the point of reaching people. And even for me as a professor, reaching students, just what I want to see them soar,
Yeah.
you know, and making that happen, because, you know, that is the point.
See, you're always professor. You're professoring right now.
I'm sorry.
I was like, she will always be Professor Fondon, which I still one of my favorite memories of you were at my Bay Path commencement was because I was like, who am I going to see? Because it's a crazy experience because it's in Mass Mutual Center, which is huge. It goes by fast. It goes by really fast. And I'm like, who am I going to see? And I remember seeing you in your regalia standing off to the side, which at the end of commencement, I'm getting chills reliving this because it's so beautiful. What Bay Path University does, and this is where I got my doctorate from, they actually have faculty waiting for students as they process out from commencement, which was so nice because it's just like a whirlwind the whole day, and you're just like, okay, I'm here, what am I doing? And I remember you were like, congratulations, and I remember saying, I'm not quite done yet, because they let us walk before, like we were already done with coursework, but I was still working on my dissertation. It was just so nice, especially, and I have to mention this, amongst the sea of white male faculty to see you, like that just meant so much to have that call out moment.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's always good to see everyone kind of come through that. But in speaking of taking the professor hat off, you know, I'm sure my daughter will agree. There is a very real person under here, and I do feel that we are real in terms of life has a lot of ups, it has a lot of downs and arounds, and we're not exempt from anyone. Even for my husband and I, give him a lot of kudos. Both of us have managed a business for 25 years. I mean, most diverse businesses don't last half of that time. But I say that, you know, we're real people, and with, you know, just that heart of, you know, we know it's not as easy, but we embrace the journey. And I'm not even gonna lie, because we all have to, it's tough. You know, when I was going to NYU, I think I was one of maybe 3 Black people in my class.
At NYU?
In my program. Remember, there's a lot of little programs.
Wow.
But, and I remember very clearly some of the other, you know, students with us, and they were telling us, you do this, and some of the other students were like, I'm not doing that. And I was just like, let's get it together, because we're gonna get out of here. So that is, you know, you have to do what you have to do. And along the way, even Colgate, when I went to college, Colgate University, a very well-meaning university, in my graduating class, if we had 10 Black people. And I'll even add a Latino in there too, just about 10.
Wow.
And I remember when I started, and we came from New York City public school system, and they were like, well, the odds are. And of course, thinking back, I just said, well, the odds are, if I keep to the test, we're gonna get there. And I remember people saying, you're taking public speaking. I said, yeah, me and the football players, but I will get out. It is tough for everyone, you know, to really keep that going. And then you have to, and even in the work environments, you know, it was not easy. When you think about, my mother actually was one of the early African-American employees at Dun & Bradstreet. I mean, you think about it, it was not easy for anyone. And I also will refer that to everyone here. The landscape today is not easy, you know. They like to think it is, but I think we can all confer it has its challenges. The difference is there's so much more that you have to use. And I encourage everyone to be there, out there for everyone, you know. And I say that off the grid, you know, I am very thankful of a lot of the friends that I have across the country. And I always used to ask myself, if everything just went just down, who would I call? And there's many basements that would take me. So I just say that's the realness. Like if people say, yeah, you're there for them, yeah, because that's how it was always done. It was you're there for people in terms of, and Dee was always there for me.
Yeah.
When she brought all of the goodness that she had, and that's why, and some of you know Dr. Lucy Lewis, there are a number of people, but that's how, and then I'm so pleased to see our audience of all these wonderful young people, because that's the new wonderful energy that we need, make no mistake about it. I promise Nikai I won't do the lecture slide in public, but it's, I'm celebrating.
Yes! But we do need that moment at some point this year, just saying. And also too, I just thought about it. Going back to Dee Shabazz, I always, like, for about 4 years, it was always the two of you together.
Yes.
When I would run into it was both of you all the time, and also too, in like I would always have these blackness moments. I'll be I remember the last time I saw all of us were together was at an Ulta. Yes. And we all shared the same hairstylist. And I remember walking out, and I walked in just feeling just grouchy. And I saw the two of you and I was like, yes, I'm about to have my blackness moment in Western Mass. Yay! And I walked away just so fulfilled after that moment. So it's,
Yes, and she told me, she said, Janine, because we would express to her, I was like, coming out with this work, and she said, you have a story to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she said, that's what you believe in that,
Mm-hmm.
And so I attribute so much to her, and to LaWanna Hood, she was another one who just said, do it. You gotta, this is your voice. And I'm encouraging anybody else out there, tell that story.
Yeah. So next question, this is a great segue. What was your favorite part of the writing process, and what part of writing the book did you find the most challenging?
Well, the most challenging is that 3/4 of the people I wanted to talk to are no longer with us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, do you ever have that feeling, I want to talk to this person, my mother, my grandmother, my grandmother's mother, and they're not here. You want to, say, why didn't I do that more when they were living, for the people you were living for, but to speak to them about their experience. So that's one of the challenging things. Yeah. The thing that I really loved is the researching the aha moments that you're like I found the first Black stewardess for the major airlines came from Boston. She was in Boston.
What?
Now, yes, it's amazing. But here goes the thing that a lot of people don't realize. We had a lot of firsts, only because we've had the best education in the country.
Yeah, that's true.
We had a lot of the best training. A lot of other, I'm not downing the rest of the country. Please don't come after me. Yes. But I'm just saying we have been known. So I tell people, even the education you don't think you've gotten, you've probably gotten more than other people.
Yeah.
But when you look at them in the Northeast particularly, but you will find a lot of firsts. From Massachusetts. Connecticut has got a fair amount too, but that's because we had a focus. And while people thought that maybe diverse people weren't learning, Breaker, yes, we were. Wow. Yeah, so there was quite a few. So when you think about it, and she was able to carry through her duties because, hey, she was from Boston. She already knew what was going to happen. So coffee, tea, me, there you go.
And also, too, people forget the wealth of knowledge and the educational institutions that exist not only across the state, the Commonwealth, but within these pockets like Boston, Western Massachusetts, like just because like with my students in my arts marketing class, I was like, I need you for the case study we're doing to identify one college or university within Greater Springfield. We're not even including like Amherst and Northampton. I said within Greater Springfield that you don't know anything about, and do some research, because just the educational footprint here. So I can see why there's a lot of firsts that come out of Massachusetts, because there is a platform here to kind of support and sustain that. And
we're also independent thinkers here.
Right.
There are a lot of people like, I'm just going to do it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
I think that's why the book will be very interesting. And I'll give you a little sneak peek, but there will be a stage show that goes with this as well. Because you have to speak to people, and you have to connect in that way. So it's going to be a multi-genred kind of, sharing. Yeah.
Of course it will be, because you're Janine Fondon.
No, I'm just saying it's I've really seen how with our Voices of Resilience, people love the reenactors, and not so much for the reenactors, but because they have that dialogue and really be able to hear these voices. And we just did one with Philip Hayton, who, the gentleman who really created Harlem. And we brought him back from the 1800s and had him, really speak. And when you see that power, you say, wow, amazing.
Nice.
And you look up his parents. One was a hairdresser, the other one was a barber, his parents. And she, in some of the writings, is known to create weaves. So let's not even talk about how far back these weaves go.
They don't start back in the 90s.
And there's a deeper, longer story, but the book actually begins in Africa. So it's, so if you could see my living room now, as my daughter can attest.
Wow.
Yes, and just special thanks to everyone here on the journey with this. It is for everyone, and everyone sees everyone in there.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of eye-opening moments.
So when can we expect the book to be available for purchase? Do you have a timeline on that yet?
I think we're looking at this summer. Yes. So, yes, it looks like it's that close.
Wow.
Yes.
That close?
Yep, that close. So we're trying to, and you know how these things work.
Yes.
We're working with that day, but it is pretty close. But it's exciting because I'm hoping that all generations will find their place to sort of say, do it, because it is the moment.
Wow, I'm really excited. And of course, Black Writers Read will announce when the book is out, where you can purchase it, and how to celebrate Janine's huge accomplishment.
And come to the show.
Yes. Oh, trust me, especially when I'm hearing that it's reenactors, of course I'm going to be there.
Yes,
That's so exciting.
And we're doing something coming up this week, but it's really amazing. But the reenactors, we're having people who are still living telling their story.
Oh, wow.
So that's another thing that we don't really realize, that a lot of the folks that are with us are just not seen. They are just not seen. And I want to hear about everyone, including young people who they did the first or the rare, because that's a part of that historic record. We have to wait 100 years for somebody wants to think about you. So we need to break that cycle and say, don't wait. Let's talk about it now.
Wow.
Yes, so.
Nice. So I want to turn to our audience to see if there's any questions here. And just for reference, because of just the nature of the recording, I'm going to repeat your question to make sure that it gets on the recording, and then can turn it to Janine to respond to the question. So does anyone have any questions, any perspective you would like to lend, any accolades, gratitude that you would like to offer for today's conversation? Yes.
Well, I would, of course, like to express my greatest gratitude for being you and always being the bold, vivacious person that you are, no matter where you go. And sometimes I feel like I have been on the end of being like a little bit more introverted, and it's so funny because like my mom, her light shines so bright that it hurt, like it affects us all. It brings out the light in all of us. And I think that if we had more people like you in the community who are able to do the same, I think that we would have such a bright community, a community that has a lot of hope and has a lot of courage and confidence to be able to meet their potential or even exceed their potential if given the opportunity. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, this is my day.
Yeah, we just had a moment of gratitude from someone very special in the audience today.
Yes.
Yes. Any other questions? Moment of gratitude. Because for folks who are listening via the audio podcast, there is a range of folks in the audience who have had Professor Janine Fondon, which is such a privilege to be able to see the folks who are in the audience who have had a chance to experience her as an educator and mentor. Yes.
So I have a bunch of questions, but
Yes.
So as you were reading the poem, you mentioned you taught me, right? And the word teacher also came up later on, and I'm wondering, is there such a thing as a bad teacher? Because that worries me.
Yeah.
Because there are times where I can be taught something, but it wasn't delivered in the best way, or is someone that I don't respect. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, does it matter if I don't respect that person? Like, is there such thing as bad teachers or bad teaching?
Oh, that's a great question. So the question for folks who are listening in, is there such a thing, and I have a response to that actually, too, is there such a thing as a bad teacher or bad teaching? And just really thinking about the qualities and the characteristics that a strong teacher should have. I'm going to answer okay, so I remember, and I recently just reconnected with my high school band director because I think like our high school closed a while ago, and he recently stumbled upon a picture of a bunch of us. And so he wanted to reconnect with all of us. And he actually just finished his doctorate as well. So a bunch of us have convened and have been conversing via GroupMe. I remember back in college, I was set to be a music educator. I wanted to be a high school band and orchestra teacher. I was just so adamant. And then I took a class where I had to experience and engage with policies, parents, and administrators. And I was like, I don't want to do all that. And I remember I was back home visiting. I can't remember which break it was. And I remember going back to see, he's now Dr. Carruthers. He was Mr. Carruthers at the time. And I remember having the conversation with him in an empty band room. And I was like, I really want to teach, but all of these things are in the way. And he literally said to me, then don't. If you do not have the resilience to deal with all of that, please don't teach, because we have enough bad teachers as it is. People, and this is not what he said, but these are things that I've discovered as I've been an educator, people who need the platform to bolster themselves and to get their accolades and their word out there. Those people, for me, especially in higher education, have been like the worst, the people who are the deemed experts. I'm like, no. Just because you've been able to publish and you got tenure, which there's that weird like gatekeeping that happens right there. Doesn't make you a great teacher. Just regurgitating to me your scholarship does not make you a great teacher. For me, what makes you a great teacher is, and I think this is why Professor Fondon is so loved, is you inhibit the student to gain agency and take the skills that you give them and adapt it for what they need and move closer to their goal. Not, I'm gonna have you regurgitate my scholarship. No, it's how do we meet your needs and what your goals are and how you wanna show up in the world. Let me give you the space to do that. And I think this is why your students and like alums just love you so much, because of that space that you give. So Professor Fondon, how would you address the question?
Well, I think one thing we all have to, when we're dealing in this system called education, we will understand we are in boxes. I try to have people really see and understand where they are, because you will also see and understand that there may be people that don't have what you need them to have for you to be who you are. That's also a sign of your own intelligence. That's in my eyes. That sometimes the intelligence you seek is not going to be in some of these spaces. But you can also begin to see where you have to adjust. You know, who you are. I am one of those people too. I'm always in a system that is trying to see me, but I have to create the box that allows me to see what I need to see, which is where this book comes from. You find a lot of people who are deeply spiritual have it too. You're understanding the limits of that circle, which sometimes is annoying for people too, because in a poem I say, I see you before you see yourself, because I can see from your actions who you really are. Yeah. And as my daughter would say, no shade. See the great education I'm getting.
And the reflection of the generations too is happening right now.
But it's the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, and having the courage just to understand, and that's why sometimes we don't have all of those friends that we think we have, whether in faculty or other things, because remember the other piece, we learned it in human communication, your intuitive being, sometimes it's like oil and water. So, and I've had people sometimes say, well, I can't quite understand you. And I said, I know. I know. I already know. Because it's a different, and like today they talk about there are different love languages. Yep. There are very different languages for people. And you can understand, you know, where that comes from. But those are part of those narratives that they go way back. But, you know, it's amazing. And I'll even say that in the book, when you go even as far back as you kind of wonder how African Americans are still standing, and a lot of diverse people. And I mean, the Middle Passage, we've been through a lot, as well as a lot of others. But a lot of that is some of that intuitive spirit that has been there. And you know, that's a big piece for people. But that's why I know for me, when I see things, I'm just like, I understand. I understand why you can say what you say. It does, and the old line that our parents used to say to us, it's not what you call me, it's what I answer to. So for me, some people are like, why aren't you speaking in staff meetings? It's really not for me to answer to, because that's on a whole other plane.
Right.
Not the soul plane for people who have come through that generation. But you see what I'm saying? Whole other, but it brings a calm, because You know, that is the richness in that, you know, and not everybody will be able to see.
Right.
You know, and sometimes you kind of wonder, you know, can they really understand who I am, what I'm doing, where I'm going, what I'm saying? But you have to find or make, or some spaces you will be able to help them see who you are. And that's the spaces I really, really like, you know, where you have been able to. And I am always thrilled when I go on LinkedIn and people are responding, and I see some of my old bosses, I mean, from years back, and because we've found those conversations, and we were able to. Some people you won't be able to do that with, but for the people, it's a bonding, because you will never, you know, forget, you know, what that means. And I would even say all of the steps we have together, you know, that's a bonding. You know, even when we created the newsroom, you know, there was a lot going through, and like, we got to do this, we got to do this. I don't know what's going on, but it's going to happen. And we will always remember those times.
Yeah.
But that's when you're building that intuitive fabric. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah. Yay. And then we have time for one more question. Yes.
Okay, so firstly, you know I have so much gratitude for you. And I'm really covered and I'm uncovered. But if Janine called me and says, show up, I show up. I know it's a great time, it's wonderful. My phone still says Professor Fondon, it doesn't say Janine.
Aww. Yes. Sweet.
Anywho, you were talking about intuition, and it reminded me of research. Because a lot of, like, I don't think people realize that research is not, like, laid out for you. It's a lot of intuition, guessing, hunches, and following them. Because you don't know what that information is.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have these ideas kind of, and you're kind of looking for that evidence. And sometimes you don't see what you're looking for.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or you find something completely opposite. So what was, I guess, the biggest surprise to you in your research? What did you expect to find that didn't find? What was shocking?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that question. I'm going to restate the question. It was such a great question in terms of like the understanding the researcher's process and also progress, like what happens when, and of course the many steps, and people don't realize the many steps that researchers take, the things that they engage with, and also the fact that it is such a solitary process. It can get very lonely very fast. And then also it's hard to talk with people about your research because it's yours. So it's just like, so a lot of times you're pulling a lot of hairs trying to figure out things on your own and navigating. So the question was around like when you either stumbled upon something or you didn't find something in particular, how did that impact your research process? And I hope that I was able to put it as succinctly. Oh, cool, thank you.
Well, you're really correct in the fact that I kind of liken it to going from New York to LA without a map, and you're walking. You know, you are really, you know, straight out with, and then you have to go through the traditional kind of figuring out, well, what possible ways. But what I tried to do on my trajectory is to take myself out of that box, you know, to sort of say, and you had also asked me at one point, how did you choose for the Voices of Resilience? Yeah. I like to really uncover the stories and the paths, because through people, that's how our tradition, an oral tradition, really began. So one story leads to another story, leads to another story. And then you get to the wonderful reception, and you're like, how did you choose this? Because it wasn't done by person, it was done through people. And that's why I always say that it's never done, because we have more people to speak with. So if anybody's listening, would like to submit me a name, that's great, because it continues. And you'll never know where you will end up when you start this process. So, and again, one of the biggest, that's not so much a surprise, but the fact that for some of the history that appears after the 1950s, 60s, I have been personally in the midst of, meaning that anybody who's lived through the 70s in New York, we went through a lot of history. So that in itself. And I was just like, wait a minute, this was us, you know? And you sort of say, wow, that's how vibrant history can be. And you sort of say, wow, just like you all are living in historic times now too for yourselves. But the simple fact that just like my high school, if you watch the movie Fame, you know, it came out in 1980, the movie and so forth. But, you know, that was my high school, you know, and there were shots taken my senior year there. So it was like, you sort of say, this was history that this whole thing unfolded. And if some of you may know the name, or maybe not so, Eartha Kitt, I don't know if she spoke at my high school graduation.
Whoa!
Like, but I'm just like, wow. You know, that's another thing that got me really started to, and you know, you sort of say blocks we played on. There was a cousin of mine lived in St. Albans, Queens, and they lived down the street from James Brown. You know, at the time, and I was just like, who knew? But these are the people that you had human moments with. This is, and that's what I try to get people to not miss right now.
Yeah.
That even whether it's friend circle, universities, whatever circles, because people are here. And in fact, on my one of my friends' blocks that we were always playing there, who lived there, at one point the Colin Powell family lived there. So we're thinking, you know, we see people, but are we, that's why I say in this, we see people, but do we really see people?
Wow.
And not for what they're gonna do, but for who they are now, you know, in terms of, and that's why, you know, whether it's students, I see so many doing wonderful things, like all of you, and, you know, you sort of say, don't wait for 100 years for us to say, you know, well, remember that. But we need you now because your voices are needed. We know there's a problem with people hiring and maintaining young people who have a lot to offer, you know. And that to me is the greatest tragedy. We have to begin to see, how do we shift that? And this whole notion that we have to wait for 2 decades before, we won't even talk about the presidential election and the 80s and the 77s and all of that, but we have to find a way to coexist to bring in brilliance. That's, and you know, we need to, you know, do that.
And then my last question to close us out, and I love like asking this question is so ritualistic because it then adds your name to my archive. What is next for you, and how can the Black writers community support you on that journey?
Well, the book, and hopefully the dramatic play that's going to be there.
Yes.
And also for everybody to be present. And I know everybody can't be in certain spaces at certain times, but I honor those who are, because I believe it was meant for your moment to be there. So that is the important thing, that, you know, where we can be there for everybody, we certainly are, you know, and we do this around the country, you know, many pockets of people that we know, but, you know, with this, I feel that everybody present is helping to create that new narrative.
Yes, this is such a beautiful way to close out our conversation. So I want to take a moment to thank the staff, the beautiful staff here at Holyoke Media, Johan, who's up running in the booth, Scott and Natalia, who helped out earlier. I want to thank all of you for attending today. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much, Janine, for sharing your time with us and for offering such amazing insight on your forthcoming book. Special thanks to On the Move Forum for supporting today's conversation.
May I give one more shout out?
Yes.
Well, I really want to shout out to Natalia Knowles, who is here at Holyoke Media. I saw her exhibit Grandmothers, which she's about to really bring forth, when it was at UMass. And it was amazing, but she is an amazing person. And we both have, I say, just co-shared energy over many years.
Yeah.
And just for her to come and to be here for that moment, and that's how we all have been. And I just want to give her a real shout out for all of the goodness.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think the website is ourgrandmothers.com, where folks can submit stories on their grandmothers.
Yes.
Yes, I love it. So thank you all for joining us today for Black Writers Read live in person. The audio from this interview will be made available on the audio podcast within the coming weeks. So be sure to visit the website at blackwritersread.com to subscribe to the audio podcast and to access past episodes. We typically live stream events about twice a month via YouTube and Facebook, and then share, and then also too, to continue to find out what's going on, more updates are available on Instagram at Black Writers Read. The audio podcast, all 4 seasons thus far, is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music. So thank you so much for starting your evening with us, and more importantly, for ensuring that Black authors continue to matter. Have a great evening.
Thank you.